Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, a moment of peace or a show of force. Leaders from China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia will gather in Beijing next week. The occasion marks 80 years since China defeated Japan, but the country then was very different from today. China's economy is under strain, even government workers reportedly unpaid, yet Beijing is pouring massive sums into military drills. What message is China sending?
The parade is to show the Chinese people that all that money that's spent and all the pain they're going through right now under Xi Jinping's leadership is not totally wasted. And the message to me is primarily domestic, is to focus the Chinese people on an enemy.
A cyber attack with global reach is linked to Beijing. The FBI is issuing a serious warning.
Beijing's indiscriminate targeting of private communications demands our stronger collaboration with partners to identify and counter this activity at the earliest stages. If you believe you are a victim of Salt Typhoon or any other malicious cyber activity, I encourage you to contact your local FBI field office.
And 3 individuals are facing charges in Taiwan for allegedly stealing TSMC's cutting-edge 2-nanometer chip secrets. Prosecutors say the stolen intel was passed to Tokyo Electron to influence supplier deals. And China's top ride-hailing firm is facing deeper troubles. A $740 million settlement highlights the fallout from its IPO. Before we dive into today's news, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter using the link down below. In tomorrow's edition, we take a closer look at China's involvement in Burma's ongoing civil war and its stake in the country's rich rare earth deposits. It drops Friday morning straight to your inbox. Don't miss it. As the U.S.-led Western alliance raises alarms over China's military activity in the Indo-Pacific, Chinese troops are set to march in Beijing next Wednesday. The parade will mark the 80th anniversary of China's victory in the Second Sino-Japanese War. On Thursday, China released a list of foreign leaders attending its upcoming military parade. At the top were Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Other attendees include officials from Iran, Belarus, and several Asian countries. Even leaders from Indonesia and Malaysia, which have maritime disputes with China, are expected to attend. In total, 26 foreign leaders will be at next week's parade. But analysts note that China's support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine may be keeping many Western countries away. So far, only Slovakia has confirmed attendance. When asked about the absence of European leaders, China's foreign ministry said the contributions of many European countries during the Second Sino-Japanese War will always be remembered. To put that war in historical context, China's current ruling party, the Communist Party, actually played only a limited role. Japan officially invaded China in 1937 and surrendered in 1945. At the time, the country was governed by the Republic of China, the government now based in Taiwan. Its military fought as the main force and accepted Japan's official surrender. The Communist Party was just a small militia back then. It only came to power later after defeating the Republic of China. Fast forward to this month, Taiwan has banned current and former officials from attending any war-related event hosted by the CCP. A Taiwanese spokesperson also denied any role by the Communist Party in fighting the Japanese. Meanwhile, Japanese media say Tokyo has been warning other countries through its embassies. Officials said China's upcoming military parade focuses heavily on historical issues and carries a strong anti-Japan message. They advise leaders to think carefully before attending. Zooming out, U.S. lawmakers and political analysts have described China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran as a new axis of evil. Now, some Western scholars call them an axis of upheaval, citing their role in global conflicts. Questions are swirling about the ranks of China's military and Xi Jinping's grip on power. Amid growing diplomatic isolation and domestic uncertainty, Beijing is moving ahead with a massive military parade in Tiananmen Square. So what message is China trying to send, and who is watching? We break it down with David Stilwell, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. General Stilwell, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Good to be back.
Now, China is going to be having a military parade to celebrate the end of World War II. This will be one of the biggest displays of their military advancements since the 2019 National Day Parade. First, what is the significance of Communist China celebrating the end of World War II, considering Communist China wasn't born yet at the time?
Well, I mean, there's a number of issues here. I guess first off, with the name Stilwell, I can point to the U.S. active participation in China, Burma, India theater, specifically in southern China during World War II, and the amount of American blood shed in defense of the Chinese people. The PRC, the Chinese Communist Party, hates that line, that we were actually very helpful allies. And we actually supplied them with a lot of lend-lease equipment to help them defend themselves. Unfortunately, we know Beijing is going to focus on the opposite. They're going to focus on the adversary. And that is completely unhelpful. Dredging up that history will actually do one thing. It'll get Japan back if they were drifting. It'll get the Japanese to remember that what we're up against here. A communist government, an authoritarian government that is not eager to make peace in the region, but is doing the opposite, stirring up trouble, as we saw in South China Sea and elsewhere. So why the parade? The parade is to show the Chinese people that all that money that's spent and all the pain they're going through right now under Xi Jinping's leadership is not totally wasted. However, they also have news of two of their own ships crashing into each other, a completely botched intercept in the South China Sea. So Xi Jinping's got his work cut out for him.
Actually, you raise a good point about Japan, because Japan has been urging Asian and European countries not to attend this military parade. So in terms of who is or isn't attending, we have a few confirmed. For instance, Putin will be going. Now, another one of the confirmed attendees besides Putin is South Korea's National Assembly Speaker. What is that signaling, given that, President Trump just hosted South Korea's president at the White House at a summit?
It feels like one step forward, two steps back. We had the summit. The language came out of that was very helpful and positive. But then South Koreans recently said that they're not going to allow U.S. forces to operate out of the Republic of Korea in a Taiwan scenario. I find that very short-sighted, because if there is a dust-up in or near Taiwan, that's going to directly affect the Korean economy and security, right? Because suddenly all that energy travel, all the trade, all that stuff's going to shut down in the Western Pacific. And countries like Korea, surrounded by enemies, an economy entirely dependent on export-import, it's all going to freeze up. So I hope the Korean government looks at this problem a little more seriously. And whether or not they commit to allowing U.S. forces to operate off the peninsula, they should. In fact, they had better do that. They should at least take a neutral position on it. Vice coming out and saying we're not going to do that. The instincts of this government, the left-leaning let's make a deal with North Korea government, has typically been to trade on U.S. interests in order to get some kind of a deal with North Korea and or China.
In terms of who may or may not be going, India's Modi is still up in the air whether or not he will be in China for the first time in 7 years to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But if he does attend this parade, what message would that be signaling? It
would be absolutely fascinating if he does go. One, China's hosting it. They have an ongoing border clash, up on the plateau. Two, the disagreement on what the future of Tibet looks like, whether the Dalai Lama is going to reincarnate. India sees it one way, China sees it another. And they're going to go at the invitation. Modi's threatening to go at the invitation and sit next to who? Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan and India are both parts of this bizarre multilateral organization that doesn't make a bit of sense, like BRICS, to anybody. And so they have to understand where their interests lie. They have to understand that the shared border, the Tibet question, all those things aren't going away. And as much as they try to play both sides, that's not going to work, especially with the current leadership in the U.S. And I hope that they think through this approach they're taking and reconsider. A lot of eyes on this upcoming military parade in terms of the gear and technical advances that might be displayed. What will that tell us about, say, China's war readiness and any potential indicator of that potential Taiwanese invasion? The government of the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, does not like transparency. Anybody who invests in anything Chinese, like Luckin Coffee, they get what they bought, which is they don't know. It's all up in the air. An example on, an analog to showing military hardware is what they showed on DeepSeek. If you remember that, maybe 6 weeks ago, two months ago, they rolled out this brand new AI thing called DeepSeek, and they did it for like zero cost, and it's 2 times better than ChatGPT or others. None of that was true. But in the process, there are enough dummies who believed that narrative that we dumped $1 trillion in value off NASDAQ. That may have been the entire point, right? That may have been an economic attack, but they used information to get people who don't understand the wisdom of distrust and verify before you go acting on Chinese government knowledge and information. And I do think that applies in the military. Again, you saw a Chinese Navy ship and a Chinese Coast Guard ship couldn't even manage the simplest of intercepts and deconfliction between, 2 folks on the same side, crashing into each other, killing possibly 4 Coast Guard crew members, and great embarrassment to Xi Jinping. I'm not saying we shouldn't prepare for this threat, not at all. I mean, they could get better in the next 5 to 10 years. They could be very good right now. We don't know. All I'm saying is we should be aware of the limitations and the obvious indications that they're not quite as good as they say. Again, the message to me is primarily domestic, is to focus the Chinese people on an enemy. We talked about Korea. When a leftist leader, a left-leaning leader, starts seeing numbers taking a drop in the polls, the simplest solution is to go kick Japan and talk about the 1905 to 1945 occupation. And the PRC does that too. Focus on an external threat to distract people from the internal failings of the Chinese Communist Party.
For General Stilwell, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Great seeing you. Thank you.
Chinese and Russian submarines just carried out their first ever joint submarine patrol in the Pacific. It's another sign of growing military ties between the two countries. Russia's state-run media announced the patrol on Wednesday. The patrol began in early August. It followed 5 days of joint naval drills in the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea. The exercises involved the Russian Pacific Fleet and the Chinese Navy. The drills included live artillery fire, anti-submarine training, and air defense maneuvers. According to a statement from the Russian Pacific Fleet, the Russian submarine involved, Volkhov, covered approximately 2,000 miles during its voyage from its base in Vladivostok. In 2021, the two countries conducted what was billed as the first joint China-Russia naval patrol in the Western Pacific. Since then, these joint patrols have taken place annually. Since 2023, Beijing and Moscow have also conducted joint air and sea patrols off Alaska. Across China, some war-themed films are leaving young viewers distressed. The movies revisit Japan's actions during the Sino-Japanese Wars, but critics say the content goes far beyond simple history lessons. Experts warn the movies are pushing anti-Japan messages and sparking troubling reactions among children. NTD's Flora Hua has more.
The movie Dead to Rights claims to portray real events that took place in Nanjing in southern China during the Sino-Japanese War in World War II. The film shows Japanese troops torturing and killing Chinese civilians. Many young children were brought to see the movie, with social media videos showing them screaming and crying after the screenings. Some parents are even encouraging their kids to hold on to that hatred. Jiang Pingchao is a writer whose books were collected by the U.S. Library of Congress. He says the film is harming Chinese children.
This has a very harmful impact. It shapes a way of thinking that can influence a person's behavior and even affect their family. Didn't Xi Jinping himself once experience harm in his own family because of this kind of hatred-driven approach?
Beyond the film, a controversial AI-generated video recently went viral on major Chinese social media platforms. It shows Japan's World War II-era Emperor Hirohito crawling on his hands and knees and barking like a dog. Japan has reportedly protested the clip with Beijing. This year marks the 80th anniversary of China's victory in the Sino-Japanese War. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs recently said Japan should honestly face its history of aggression. In fact, over the years, multiple Japanese prime ministers have officially apologized to China for wartime actions, including the 1995 Maruyama Statement.
I looked into the history. You can even check CCTV, the Chinese Communist Party's own broadcaster. It reports that in 1995, Japanese Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama delivered the Murayama Statement. He issued a clear, direct apology to the Chinese people.
Yet many Chinese remain unaware of the apology. Some even turn that hatred into violence. News reports have documented attacks on Japanese people in China in recent years. Analysts say the Chinese Communist Party often channels patriotism into hostility against nations the regime wants to target. Flora Hua, NTD News.
The notorious Salt Typhoon cyber attack linked to the Chinese Communist Party is back in the spotlight. Now, the FBI, along with U.S. and international partners, has issued a joint cybersecurity advisory urging private companies to act quickly. The message is clear: detect and stop these threats before they can do serious damage. Let's zoom in.
Cyber and intelligence agencies from the U.S. and more than 20 other countries put out a joint warning Wednesday. They outline how Chinese government-backed hackers broke into major American telecom networks last year and urged companies to start looking for signs of that same activity. The FBI now says this campaign has breached more than 80 countries, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. The joint advisory links the campaign uncovered last year, known as Salt Typhoon, to 3 Chinese companies, including 2 never before publicly named. The head of FBI Cyber Division says the incident shows the need for closer cooperation with international partners to detect and stop these attacks as early as possible. At the same time, the Pentagon is addressing a different China-related cybersecurity risk involving Microsoft. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the company used Chinese engineers to service sensitive Pentagon cloud systems. The Obama-era program called Digital Escorts has been running for almost a decade.
For nearly a decade, Microsoft has used Chinese coders, remotely supervised by U.S. contractors, to support sensitive DoD cloud systems. The program was designed to comply with contracting rules, but it exposed the department to unacceptable risk. I mean, if you're thinking America first and common sense, this doesn't pass either of those tests.
Hegseth says the Department of Defense has launched 2 investigations, one by outside auditors and another in-house, to determine whether Chinese workers embedded malicious code. Hegseth also said Chinese coders would no longer service the Pentagon's cloud systems.
The use of Chinese nationals to service Department of Defense cloud environments, it's over. We've issued a formal letter of concern to Microsoft documenting this breach of trust, and we're requiring a third-party audit of Microsoft's digital escort program, including the code and the submissions by Chinese nationals. This audit will be free of charge for U.S. taxpayers.
In July, Microsoft said it has stopped using China-based engineers. Meanwhile, cyber officials say China's espionage campaigns are not slowing down. They're warning U.S. allies and American companies to lock down their systems before the next breach.
An artificial intelligence startup warns that AI is being weaponized to carry out increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks. The company calls it an unprecedented evolution in malicious operations, making defenses far more difficult. Here are the details. A new report from Anthropic describes how criminals are employing advanced models such as Claude. Bad actors are taking advantage of developments in every stage of an attack, from reconnaissance and credential theft to ransomware and fraud. Researchers said AI tools are now active operators in real-time breaches. Anthropic's report says this represents a fundamental shift in how cybercriminals can scale their operations. Anthropic added that a broader pattern is emerging where criminals can now use AI to carry out attacks once reserved for sophisticated groups. Taiwanese prosecutors say 3 people have been indicted for stealing trade secrets from chipmaker Tsmc. The stolen information involved the company's most advanced 2-nanometer chip process. Prosecutors say the defendants used the information to help Japan's Tokyo Electron compete for Tsmc supplier deals. Prosecutors are recommending a 14-year sentence for one of the defendants, a former Tsmc employee surnamed Chen. He allegedly collected insider knowledge from his former colleagues after joining Tokyo Electron. TSMC says it has a zero-tolerance policy for any compromise of trade secrets. In response, Tokyo Electron says it found no evidence the company was involved. The firm added that no orders were given to steal information, and there's no proof that secrets were leaked. This is the first case under Taiwan's national security law involving the theft of core chip technologies. Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company TSMC will reportedly stop using Chinese-made machinery in its cutting-edge 2-nanometer chip plants. The move marks a major shift in the company's supply strategy. TSMC is moving ahead with mass production of these chips by 2025. Its 2-nanometer chip technology is the most advanced in the global semiconductor industry. In the past, TSMC sourced some equipment from Matson Technology, which Beijing acquired in 2016. Last year, TSMC considered similar restrictions for its 3-nanometer lines, but put the plan aside over production concerns. Coming up, China's top ride-hailing firm is facing deeper troubles. A $740 million settlement highlights the fallout from its IPO. And Hong Kong's pro-democracy tycoon Jimmy Lai facing the final day in a national security trial. Critics warn it's another blow to the city's freedoms. That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. China-based ride-sharing app Didi has agreed to pay $740 million to settle a shareholder lawsuit over its U.S. IPO. The company announced the settlement Thursday along with its quarterly results. Didi recorded a loss of $351 million for the second quarter of this year. The current lawsuit centered on whether the company knew about regulatory scrutiny and potential risks before it went public. According to Bloomberg, Chinese regulators had asked Didi to delay going public over national security concerns tied to its massive data collection. Didi is often referred to as China's alternative to Uber and went public in the U.S. back in 2021. This settlement closes a major chapter in the company's ongoing legal and regulatory challenges. Closing arguments are finished in Hong Kong's national security trial of pro-democracy tycoon Jimmy Lai. The 77-year-old is the founder of the now closed pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily. Here's the story.
He has pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and 1 count of conspiracy to publish seditious material. He faces a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. Lai, a longtime critic of Chinese Communist Party, is one of the most prominent figures to face prosecution under the draconian national security law. The law was imposed after a mass pro-democracy protest in 2019. His trial is the most high-profile example of China's crackdown on rights and freedoms in the territory. The United States and other countries have condemned the trial as politically motivated. A Hong Kong court said it will deliver its verdict at a later date.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.